Hey everybody, it's Rob with Frontline Mindset with National Fire Radio. I am excited today because special guest on the show today. I have Randy James. You may have seen him from Fire Department Coffee, doing some of the videos that they and the content that they do out there. Or you may have run into him at shows like FDIC and other events. I happened to run into him this past couple weeks ago out in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, for the Rosenbauer dealership meeting. And Randy and I got to talk about some of the projects that he's working on, and I invited him on the show today because with Fire Department Coffee, they have their fire truck Rescue One, and it's a disaster response truck that they've started to use for responding to natural disasters. And we had a pretty good conversation in the airport about it. So, with that being said, we're going to start today's episode. Randy, thank you for coming on, man. I hope that introduction wasn't too long-winded for you.
Yo, Rob, it's perfect. Thank you, man. I'm honored and humbled that you would want to talk to me about it. So thank you.
Yeah, I was sitting in the airport with you, and I was kind of amazed at just because I should start this by saying I think if anybody's ever done disaster relief work, you would understand the gravity of a conversation such as we had in the airport, because disaster relief work is not like a localized emergency where we go respond to a house fire maybe because we put that fire out and then we either demolish the house and rebuild, or we rebuild the section of the house. But like mitigation almost always happens afterwards, where disasters, they can be pretty widespread and it can be overwhelming, and it's just sometimes it's a total loss, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really an interesting, especially as being a first responder, being a firefighter, to be on the opposite side of the mitigation side. You and I are so used to being on that mitigation side. And I think that's one of the coolest parts about this project for me is that I don't do any mitigation. We're just there to support the mitigators, right?
Mm-hmm.
The project is kind of built out around some of the things that I wish I would have had for the men and women I serve with, or the communities affected. Some of the things I wish I would have had on a truck or been able to offer someone going through, what these people are going through during these natural disasters.
So, can you give us an overview of? I have it listed as a Rescue One project, but like the Rescue One disaster response truck, like,
Yeah,
and how did it start, and what's the mission of it?
yeah, that's perfect. I guess we'll go back to like the beginning. I've been here with Luke for probably around 6 years. Me and him worked in Rockford Fire Department together. I'm still on the job. He left several years ago, but so I started shipping and just kind of helping out and watching this kid grow this business. And one of the things we would do early is if we saw communities around us or around the country that were going through something, we would maybe send a 5 pound bag of coffee, and then I would scribble on a note and put it in the package. If I saw an address come through where something was going on, or if we would look up a disaster area, maybe a tornado went through, we would look up the fire stations that would be serving it and just send them a 5 pound bag with a note. Hey, keep your chins up. We're watching what you're doing. You're doing amazing work,
Mm-hmm.
and send that. Well, it started to, one time I sent one to Illinois had a tornado, and I sent one down, and a phone call came back through customer service actually, and the person was kind of emotional and said that little note just kind of meant something, and it kind of got my mind started on, like, would it be a bigger gesture to send hands and feet? What if we could go, instead of just sending coffee, what if we could go there and maybe serve that community or the responders? And that's kind of the idea. And I asked Luke, I said, hey, I think we're at a point where the business has grown where somebody would want to partner with us, because there's enough people watching, and we could do some good together, because there's no way we're going to be able to buy a fire truck and build, it's just,
Right.
the costs and lead times and everything the way it is right now. So he said, yeah, I like your idea. What do you envision? I said, I envision all the stuff that we would need for Midwest storms, right? That's where I live, Illinois. It was kind of what was on my heart at that point. The things I wish I had, maybe clean clothing on there. Maybe, what if we could, instead of just taking people's dirty clothes, what if we could wash their clothes for them right on site? Midwest storms, no power, no water. You lose your ability to be clean. You lose your basic need of hygiene. And so then I just started, okay, what about a shelter? What about all this other equipment? And that was kind of how the concept, just as an idea, how that started, what I would put on it.
Yeah. Um, so the mission just kind of was like, from it really did grow from this cup of, or this 5 pound bag of coffee to like expanding into these other areas. And really, when you're talking about washing clothes on site, giving that cup of coffee, providing some like, to me, what I heard was like restoring dignity.
It is. It's
Because
exactly what I say, is to protect people's dignity and just restore a little humanity when they're going through these things that, you know, we, and this, and a lot of the men and women, that'll listen to this, we're the most well-trained firefighters in the world in North America. We have everything and all the equipment and training to mitigate anything. But
mm-hmm.
what we're not the best at, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, is at protecting people's basic needs and their dignity when they go through these things.
Yeah,
It's
I would
like,
agree with that.
so I would, like anybody listening to this, you're looking at that apartment building in the basement, you got everything to put it out, and then you turn 180 degrees and you look at the people affected, and you don't have a chair for them to sit down in, or you don't have something warm for them to drink, or you don't have a blanket and they're soaking wet, or they're holding their dogs by their leashes. And what if or by their collars? What if because they're everything for their pets is in the basement? What if I had leashes on my truck? What if I had a way to feed their pets, or to just make them comfortable in that moment? And so that's the whole idea. You hit it right on the head, Rob.
Yeah, and just because you said that, there's that made me think of something. Uh, I have a friend, and I sent you a quick text message just so we don't forget about it. But yeah, that's some cool stuff there. And you're right, because we do like this is like the simple things. Like I know we wrote we have a policy at work, and it's a letter and it's called After the Fire, to help the citizens out after that one event. So like that's on that micro scale, but on the macro, right? Like that's exactly what we want to do, and that's a great example. What kind of truck are you using for the project?
Yeah, so it's a Rosenbauer Avenger. So then fast forward a little bit. Now I've got a concept, and I'm talking to a gentleman, actually a salesman out of Canada that sells Rosenbauers out of a dealership up there, and his name's James Watt. And we did a little coffee deal for City View Specialty Vehicles out of Canada. That's not a plug. This is just a real part of the story. And
Yeah.
we're talking on the phone, and I take him some coffee to FDIC, and me and him are having a conversation, and he says, "You know who might be interested in this project? I'm doing this with you." He said, "Rosenbauer might be interested." He says they like to challenge, the normal way things are done, and they might be one you'd want to talk to. Do you want an introduction? And I said, "Yeah, if you think, I was just kind of figuring out how are we going to do this?" And I said, "I guess now's the time. Let's go make a pitch." And we went to the booth and started with a conversation, and that's kind of how it started. But Rosenbauer ended up contacting me, went through several people. We had just a couple meetings, and
Mm-hmm.
and then ended up really getting grilled and having a real in-depth conversation with the marketing director there in North America, Allison Yendick. And if you know Allison, I know you do, but she's just small in stature, but she's a fireball. And she ran me through the ringer of what this looks like. What would you be doing with this? How would we partner on this? And I said, any way you want. We have just like you, we have business relationships, and then we have partnerships. And I said, this is not going to be a business relationship. This will be a partnership. We will work together. And I understand this has to be good for Rosenbauer too. And she called me back like 6 months later and said, "We're ready, and we have an Avenger for you." And I think it's really important for people to know Rosenbauer never asked us for anything. They never said, "You have to bring it here. You can't do this." They said, "Do the work that you're talking about, and we'll just continue to have conversations on how this goes forward together." They never asked me for anything. They never asked us for any money. So for me, it was like validation of a concept, that I had had on my heart for a long time. So when that phone call came, I was sitting right in this place, right in this exact same seat I'm sitting in a Zoom call, and then it became very real. All right,
Yeah.
now you're going to get this rig. How are you gonna now? What? How are you gonna run
Yeah.
it? How are you gonna respond? What are you gonna do? But
I and I have to say, like Allison, I've that sounded great. I watched her through the company there because, like, especially with building the ladder truck and the lead times and stuff like that, we did for Fairview. But she's somebody who reminds me of like that saying of it. They have true grit.
oh
Like
yeah,
she's just like I said that she's a fireball and it's that's awesome. Um, yeah.
what's
So
funny is if you know her background a little bit, and she'll probably be mad for me saying this, but I'm gonna do it anyway. But she's an Illinois farm girl. She's I believe a single child, grew up on an Illinois farm, and so she does have true grit. She worked really hard,
yeah,
and in a small town not too far from me, and we didn't know that until we met. But then I told her one time, I said, I know why you're, you know, built like that, why you're tough, and
yeah,
you had to be. And she's amazing to work with.
yeah. She is. I think she's probably one of the most underestimated people in the business. And especially after watching her this last week. So, um, the the truck. What? How did you guys outfit it for disaster relief and emergency response?
Yeah.
Like,
So again, just started thinking about all the things you and I and every other firefighter wish they would have had at certain times. So,
mhm.
and I again gravitated toward Midwest storms, and so the rural. I work in the city of Rockford, which is 155,000 people, but around us there's a lot of rural areas, and every season. And I've learned a lot about storm season as I've responded to several tornadoes in the Midwest, like what's happening with Tornado Alley and which way it's moving. But rural storms, right? No power, and people on a well now have no water. So started thinking about having a big PTO driven generator on the truck so I could power a home or multiple places. And then so I have obviously coffee brewers on there with a hot water spigot also so that I can actually make food. You could actually prepare meals. I have food on the truck that just take boiling water, and it makes a pretty nice meal. That's another partner of ours that donated to the project, Folicious, who we met through some events. Wanted to add to the project. A lot of companies have come on board to add
Yeah,
items that we need. I have refrigerators on there, so if it's a warm weather event, I can keep cold beverages and food also in there. I've got a television, a bank of USB chargers, because when we lose power, now our phones are dead in about 5.5 hours. I can charge people's phones up. I have a shelter, Deployed Logics, who makes disaster response shelters. I reached out to them because they had one that I really liked, an ASAP 12. Really quickly can put it together. Two people can set it up in about a minute and a half. I can get people out of the weather. I can heat it and cool it. And then they also donated a shower. I have a water tank on this truck and an on-demand hot water heater. The hot water heater allows me to set up a shower, so if somebody needed to get clean, we could actually clean them and then get them in clean clothes. Take their dirty clothes. We could do the laundry and wash them if we needed to. And then a washer, obviously washer and dryer. So they're RV units, right? I started to think about, well, what types of these mechanicals can take the road abuse? Well, everything that's on an RV. So an RV washer and dryer. One of our responses, and we'll get to it later a little bit, I guess, if we go down the line of where it's been, but when we got to Western North Carolina, in Fairview and Swannanoa, there were some firefighters that have been in the same uniforms for days. They were still searching their areas in that terrain, and they had no water, no electricity. They had gone through all their uniforms and all their clean towels, and we were able to do laundry for them, and it was a big deal to them to get them in clean clothes.
yeah.
Just sat there and did laundry, something simple like that.
I think back to Hurricane Sandy, and we responded to the city of Long Beach to provide fire protection with an engine, and we were, I want to say we were there for 24 hours running calls but we didn't have like there was like one shower in the firehouse that we were at, and there was a lot of us. And I remember this Connex box dropped with, and it was like a prison shower almost, like
Yeah,
polished steel mirrors and stuff like that. But like I was so grateful because I could finally get clean, and like it's just something as like I can't put it into words that the restoration of dignity that you can bring to somebody just by offering them a shower and some clean clothes.
absolutely.
Like
We're very
it's
comfortable. We're very
yeah,
comfortable in this country, and most of the time we don't have to be uncomfortable. But when those things happen that you have no choice, that's when you start to recognize it.
you've said a couple times the Midwest storms. Kind of walk us through that because I think that's going to help kind of portray the mindset of where how solving the problem is. We should probably understand at least like from your angle of what you saw because you said you're dealing with power outages and well water and stuff like that. But what's a good in air quotes Midwest storm that you see?
We had some. We'll get high winds and a lot of trees down in communities without power. We had not too far from us before I had the truck. We had in Fairdale, Illinois, we had a tornado go through and wipe down. And when I say a town, there might have been several hundred people living in this little community. Couple fatalities devastated that town, and so there's immediate need there of they don't have the resources that the larger metropolitan areas get. And
Right.
so when you can send something like this, and even for the first responders, had we been able to have that, I would have been able to set up off to the side. And as they cleared houses and found victims, or just were able to clear people that weren't injured, hey, go over by that fire department coffee engine over there, and they can get you cleaned off, comfortable. They can start helping you make contact with who you need to, call family members, get you what you need immediately, and just the basic stuff. And so that's kind of the thoughts that went into it too. And then our first real deployment was to Clarksville, Tennessee. And they had a tornado down there. We ended up getting down there, 150,000 people. But what was interesting about it, it was getting down to 40 degrees, and they still had around 50,000 people without power. So you had a situation where blankets, clothing, that type of stuff was a big deal. People were still trying to relocate. We ended up serving at a church and serving volunteers that were going into the areas to start to clean debris. We ended up at a Walmart helping distribute water, bottled water, um, and then you start to learn. Every deployment I've learned something. And then shortly after that, we ended up in Greenfield, Iowa. So if your listeners look up the tornado in Greenfield, Iowa, almost exactly the opposite of Clarksville, 2,100 people, I think, about 6 hours from here. So we were able to just mobilize and point it that direction. But they had some of the highest recorded wind speeds on the ground since they've been recording weather. I think it was over 300 miles an hour on the ground.
Ooh,
Yeah, it devastated that community, and we were there for about 4 or 5 days, and really just set up. We were one of the first ones in town. We set up by some other agencies that were just cooking food, um, but it was really unique because, again, no water, no power, but this was for the whole community now, just 2,100 people, um, and then you start to see the different needs due to being a metropolitan area to strictly rural, and the needs change.
yeah.
But the
What
truck
are
became, it was really cool because the truck became the meeting place in the morning. The people from the community would come there because it was the only place they could get a cup of coffee. They'd get coffee and they would meet there in the morning and they would reconnect with people. They would cry. They would laugh. They would tell stories. I watched people that hadn't seen each other in a couple days. It's a pretty moving thing,
yeah,
that's where, and then you started to have, and this happens every deployment, the responders start to know you're there. So the fire department came by, Iowa's Task Force 1 came by with about 40 members, lined up, got coffee. They were there searching and doing some recon, and they came by to say hi. And it's just, people want to know that somebody cares about what they're going through, really. I mean, that's what that's what I'm seeing when we are able to go, you know.
Yeah, I can't imagine because, like, it's losing the power. You lose your infrastructure. You feel very cut off, and it gets very lonely very fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are some of the biggest logistic challenges to doing this?
Yeah, the travel time. Obviously,
Okay.
Greenfield, Iowa, 6 hours. That's awesome. We're mobilized and on the ground quickly before some of the larger agencies. And I'm not. I mean, there's amazing agencies out there that respond, but sometimes it takes. They've got to get everybody mobilized, get the vehicles ready, get drivers. We
Mm-hmm.
load the truck and head that way. But obviously, Los Angeles was a different animal. You know,
Right.
we sent a gentleman that works here, Vit. It's one of the important players in our company's father who has his CDL, and we put him in the truck on Tuesday, and he got there Friday afternoon.
Right.
So Luke and I flew in and then grabbed the truck and started serving. But it's the logistics of transporting, right?
Yeah.
That's the big deal.
I, I think it's important to point out too, Randy, that um, you're fire department coffee, but you're not a fire department. So, like in New York State, fire apparatus are considered farm vehicles, so you don't need a CDL to operate them. I know certain states have a
Yeah,
different class, so you need to have a commercial driver's license to operate the truck. Like it,
me
that's a,
too. Yeah, so Illinois is exempt. When I'm at the fire station, I don't need a CDL, but the minute I get off in the morning, when I'm no longer in a life-saving capacity, we had to all get CDLs to drive
yeah.
this. Yeah.
So that's because that's the other side of this, and I'm sure because it's a fire truck, it's got a governor. So there's, even if the speed limit's not saying that we're driving like the Talladega Nights here, but there's even on those long stretches, you're still going to be probably governed at like 68 miles an hour on a highway.
Yeah,
So
but it's governed right about 70, 71.
hmm so yeah, it's time. It's time to do that. Um, are there any other logistic challenges that you have with it as far as like gear and equipment, or is that just something you've kind of figured out along the way?
Yeah, you learn every deployment, but one of the things is having somebody on the that we're connected to in that area. That always helps. Or once I point it, I'll have some of our staff make phone calls. Hey, call this fire station that's right in the. We can look up on Google Maps where these disaster areas are and what
Yeah,
stations and departments, and we're quick to tell them, look, we're not we're not there to mitigate. We're not, we want to support you who are mitigating and be able to fill a role wherever you see us needed. We'll never come in there, hard charging to do anything. And what's really cool, Rob, is as these deployments have grown, like incident command will come in LA. It was fantastic. In the morning, I would operate out of Zuma Beach on the Pacific Coast Highway, and then I also operated out of Pasadena in the parking lot of the Rose Bowl. You had the Eaton Fire and the Palisades Fire going, so you had these two forward operating bases, and I wanted to spread, and serve, as many people as I could. So I would start every other morning. I'd start there. But the incident command would come out, and the PIOs would come out and say, "Hey, the talk about through camp is that you guys came all the way 30 hours and we appreciate it." And then they would start saying things like this: "Hey, I've got 40 firefighters up at Camarillo Air Base that run all the fixed wing, all the rotary wing aircraft for these fires. Nobody's getting up there. They're not getting any love. You've got, these movie stars bringing food to the Malibu staging area, and these
hmm
men and women are up there grinding. Would you go up there and visit?" It's like, absolutely. That's exactly what we want to do, is just kind of lift spirits, support that way. So every place we went now, they will come and ask us, would you mind going and paying these guys a visit?
yeah,
A member of the U.S. Forest Service came up one morning and says, "Hey, Altadena got blasted with this fire, and they've got a lot of people displaced. And again, Malibu is the one that everybody's talking about, but there's a ton of people that are suffering here. We have a community meeting tomorrow at 4 p.m. at Westminster Presbyterian Church. We're going to be supplying food, clothing, all the fire personnel, the building department, the water department is going to be there giving information to the community members about what the next steps are for them. Would you mind taking the truck in there and serving coffee for the event and just supporting them a little bit? It's like, absolutely. That's what the whole premise of this is, to support the men and women serving and also the communities affected. So
what is that like, interacting with people who may have never heard of fire department coffee, and are just like because I can imagine there's this perplexion on their faces. They're trying to figure out like how this truck got here and put it all together. Also being extremely stressed from the incident that's happened.
Yeah, I'm always amazed like how appreciative, and the things they say, like, thank you so much for coming. And you start to try to figure that out, like, why, they've lost everything, and really all I've done is, for certain people, is maybe bring some clean clothes, a cup of coffee, a little conversation, tell them, hey, we're sorry for what you're going through. But it's the humanity side.
Mm-hmm.
It's what I keep coming back to, just like you said, protecting people's dignity a little bit. People want to know somebody cares about what they're going through. And I think we've lost sight of that in some aspects of our job. We're really good at the mitigation side, right? We're really good at putting the fires out and restoring the utilities, but there's something else that's lost. It's a little harder to restore. That you can't, it's harder to deliver that.
100%, man. What are some of the memorable deployments that you've had with Rescue One?
Western North Carolina,
Okay,
without a doubt, changed my life about what this project meant.
Talk
The
about it. Like
gravity
I mean, that is changing your life is a pretty significant event. So let's dive into it a little bit. We'll jump ahead because I had some questions for the end about it, but we'll do it now.
So we started to watch that as Helene came inland, and it's a really, I would encourage everybody to get on YouTube and start looking up, Western North Carolina and Helene and all the towns out there. I think we went to 22 different areas while we were out there for a couple weeks, and just stopping at all the different small stations that are up in the Appalachians. So number one, the terrain, the people, and the destruction. It was, so if you don't know how that happened, Helene started to come inland, but before it came in, it sat on the coast, and so like those areas of Western North Carolina had rain for about 4 or 5 days, right? Because as that hurricane's coming in, the outskirts of it, the edges of it are creating its own weather, and it's raining. Mm-hmm. So they had about an inch of rain a day for about 5 or 6 days. Then Helene came inland, and it parked at the top of Mount Mitchell, and it dropped like 30 inches of rain in a few hours. And the mountain couldn't hold anymore, and it just gave way in every different direction. So you had landslides and mudslides and huge walls of water just running down each side of Mount Mitchell, which, again, when I went to Greenfield, Iowa, 2100, there's a path of destruction. I can almost see all of it if I stood up on top of the truck. When a mountain gives way in every direction, we would start our morning, and I might drive 60 miles, and then the next town that I wanted to stop in that I heard was really destroyed might be 45-mile drive, due to the terrain and the low spots and the valleys down the sides of Mount Mitchell where the water and mud would travel. With the towns that were next to rivers or waterways, and a lot of places that a lot of people have been, that were vacation destinations, like Chimney Rock, like Lake Lure, just beautiful areas that I think one of the things that's so memorable is that there's generational change to those areas.
Right.
It has changed for generations. If you are alive now and you have been to those areas, they are gone. You saw them in a way they'll never be restored. Yeah. I saw bodies of water that were normally, 15 yards wide, that had grown to 150 yards wide of bedrock washed away, homes washed away, And then once that water got down the mountain after a few days, now they're back to 15 yards wide, but you've got 100 and you got 75 yards each side of destruction. You know,
Yeah.
it is really, really tough to see. There's people still missing. There's people that will never be found, that there are under feet of mud, probably 10, 20, 30 feet of mud. I saw water out of its banks 60 feet. Just the stories of people watching other people be washed away, never to be found again. And then we got up into Girton, North Carolina, and there was a group of about 8 or 9 of us that unloaded a Chinook helicopter like 12 or 13 days after the storms. And I'm looking around, and we were unloading 55-gallon barrels of gasoline, of generators, of clothing, of little radiant heaters. The generators were there to power the heaters for people, because it was the weather was coming in. It was getting into the 40s. You had the entire town of Asheville, North Carolina, without potable water for weeks. So that's the biggest city there, and it even affected them.
That's one that I'm familiar with, because I spent some time in Asheville, and to see the images, I was speechless. I couldn't.
Yeah. We went, and so I got a request and so the other thing that's requests are come through customer service now. Hey, we saw the truck is headed that way. One of the requests said, hey, would you mind coming down to the water department in Asheville? They're working 12 hours a day, round the clock almost, shifts of 12 hours, and they're really feeling down, because all they want to do is restore water to their town, and people don't understand the gravity. So I said, absolutely. So we went down one morning. We started at the water department, the water treatment plant, and there's a woman there that got emotional and said, we just talked about, let them talk. We just let them talk about what they were dealing with and what they were feeling, and she said to me, I'll never forget it. She said, I'm on the same water system as all the people in Asheville. My water's out too, and I'm working as hard as I can to get it restored. And I wish people knew that. And you don't think about, instead she's getting the negative side. Why is our water, you work at the water department, why don't you have our water on yet? Right. Well, in reality, what happened is the water in Asheville comes from some mountain reservoirs, and as that mountain gave way, it pulled all the piping and everything out of that reservoir. So the terrain there, if you've been in those Appalachians, is really tough. And they said once we got it reconnected and found, where it had come apart, then we powered it up, and then we had nothing but leaks everywhere. Then once we got the leaks fixed, now the whole water system has been infiltrated with bacteria. We're not sure we can use any of the water that's in the system. We may have to flush it all out, clean, and start from scratch. But you could see, in her face that she wanted that water on, and she was doing everything she could, and so we just went and spent the morning with them, telling them, you're doing a great job. People don't know it, but we do, and you're doing a great job,
Is there a moment that stood out the most for you during that deployment in particular, whether it was a challenge that you overcame, a sign of resilience, or just a moment that stuck with you out of everything that you saw there?
Yeah, the communities in Western North Carolina that suffered the most were some of the most economically depressed or challenged areas. So I don't, there's a lot of stories out there. I don't want to, so this is just my opinion. It seemed like because those people were poor, they might not have got the attention that some of the areas where there's other disasters get. And now I hope that's not true, but I'm in the United States 13 days after a storm, and I'm unloading a Chinook helicopter in the mountains of Western North Carolina that's flying in gasoline still.
Right.
Like, how are we not? of all the things we can do, how are we not more able to support these small communities? Why are we not? I think we have the capabilities. Um, and after we get off this call, I'll send you some photos, Rob. But and then as we're unloading the pallets, the other thing, you started to hear things like who's not getting support and why aren't we getting this? I started to look at the pallets of what's being unloaded, and they had labels on them. Every pallet had a label. So as I started to look at each one, just because I'm curious about that stuff, my mind's going a
Yeah.
million miles an hour while we're doing this. Never done anything as cool as that, for such an important reason. They all have labels that said Samaritan's Purse. So if people have asked me, who do we donate to? Well, you donate to Samaritan's Purse, because I unloaded pallets and pallets and pallets of items that had their labels on them that were flown in to Girton, North Carolina on a Chinook helicopter based out of the Oklahoma National Guard. And I don't have any affiliation to Samaritan's Purse, but I touched their items that were getting to people that needed them.
Right.
So
You were a part of the chain in getting those supplies to people that needed it.
yeah. And then yeah.
What like thinking about disaster relief work, it involves chaotic, high stress situations. For somebody who's going to do, because this is not something where anybody can just kind of step in. I believe like there's always a help, but there has to be a mindset that someone needs to be effective in this environment. Can you just talk on that a little bit?
Yeah. First thing, you're never going to feel like it's time to go home. You're never going to feel like it's the right time to leave. As first responders, you and I, and the men and women watching, if you are a first responder, you understand that we go in, there's a role that we play, and then sometimes once that's mitigated, then we leave, and maybe it's the building department coming in, maybe it's Red Cross. We're used to that, but some of the people that have deployed with me that aren't first responders had a hard time leaving, got emotional because we're leaving, and there's still work to be done in Western North Carolina. We still have, disaster relief agencies on the ground there. And so one of the tough things is being able to separate and understand that you go do your role where you fit, and then when you leave, it's somebody else's turn to step in. And you be as effective as you can while you're
Right.
there. And then be willing to turn it over to someone else. That's tough. That's the toughest part.
Anything else that you can think of?
Yeah, I think it's important to keep those some connections when you do go. You've meant a lot to people, and I still have connections from every place I've went where we email back and forth, call, offer encouragement. You mean something to those people when you go do this. So I think it's important for both. I always say, Rob, that the people that we go serve do way more for me than I ever do for them. I come back with my heart is full. I've got real good perspective on what's really important, because I've seen people that have lost everything. They do more for me.
Is there anything that you do personally to prepare mentally or physically before heading out on a relief mission?
Yeah, you better be ready. There's a lot of work to do. So when we hit the ground, sometimes it's up at 5:30. So let's take LA for instance. I was up at 5:30 and would work and travel different places and serve just until up until 10, 11, midnight. Then get back, try to get cleaned up, get the truck ready for the next day, depending on where my schedule had me going. So you got to make sure and get your rest when you can. Make sure you're eating good, because you're going to be busy. Taking care of yourself too. You got to take care of yourself. It's just like being in the fire service. You got to take care of yourself enough to be effective when you are on the ground.
Ever since, and I refer to Sandy because it's the main one that we had to go. We left our firehouse, essentially, went somewhere far away and stayed, I've ever since then I made sure that I kept food in the firehouse that guys could put in, that like MRE, whether they were MREs or dehydrated food that actually tasted good. Because shout out to Peak Performance, because their curry chicken is amazing. But like you have to be fed, and like that was one thing we were worried about when we were in Long Island, was like, where are we going to get food? And we, thankfully by that point the train had come in, but like according to some of the other guys, like yeah, there was, they stumbled upon food eventually, but like they didn't know.
Yeah.
So these are things you gotta kind of
That's
think
what's
of.
cool about this truck with the refrigeration and the brewers, the hot water brewers, that I can bypass the brewer and just run boiling water. I have ready to eat meals with a lot of calories in it. We have MREs on there
Hmm.
also. And then the refrigerators, I'm able to load those up when we go. Um, and then just to, it's a lot of it's that product is for the people we're serving, but at least we've got it on there if we need it to.
Do you have a moment that you had to kind of adapt on the fly during one of these deployments, and can you kind of share about like what that was like?
Yeah, I
I mean,
guess
this
it would
is,
be
I was gonna
good.
say there's no book on this per se. Like you guys are kind of like, there's, you get some guidance, but you were really, you've grown this mission and figured it out. So there's got to be some lessons along the way.
Yeah. One of the things is all, I'm always cognizant of the firefighters and the people that are managing that incident, right? Because the worst thing that I could think of, like what would be intimidating or almost disrespectful, is if I'm on a scene or you're on a scene and somebody else's fire truck shows up. Like, what are you doing here?
Hmm.
So, um, like one of the things we did is when I built this out, I wanted to be non-threatening to other first responders because we're not there to mitigate. We're just there to support. So one of the things we did was we lit the truck up. I have emergency lighting on it, which is really just for parades or for conventions or for kids when kids want to check the truck out because it sits here outside at our operation. But I lit the truck amber too. In my meetings at Rosenbauer, I said I need this truck lit two ways because what's non-threatening for a firefighter? It lit up amber lights, just like the gas company, the power company.
Right.
We're trained to know that if you're yellow, you're, tow truck drivers, you're not there trying to be some emergency responder. But I guess I got off track a little bit, but to go back to your question, dealing with incident command and really letting them know that you are not there to get in their way and you want to help them and support them in any way they need. So there's been times where people maybe didn't understand what the mission was, as we showed up. Uh, just gravitating, making sure that you're not in the way. You know,
Yeah.
there's so many good organizations out there. If Team Rubicon is one that comes to mind. Like a lot of guys ask me, like, how are you going to do this? What do you mean you're going to respond? And for a while I was like, well, I don't know exactly, but I just feel like there's a need for some of this stuff. And I
Yeah.
said, listen, I'm not going to rewrite disaster response. There's a ton of great agencies. Team Rubicon is one of the best. Um, I'm not going to rewrite this. I'm just, maybe I can support someone somewhere and I'll try to find a little niche, and that's kind of where we're at now.
Yeah. I think that if I have a couple friends who do Team Rubicon work, and um, they talk about like how they, like, churches also are very
Well,
good at, and
best.
if it wasn't needed, Team Rubicon wouldn't be as successful as it is.
Yes. Churches, just like you said, 100%. Um, you want to know what the needs of the community are, you go to the church. They know the members, they know what the needs are, they spend every day serving them. Now there's a disaster, they still know where the needs are. And one of the things I would tell people, and this is, I leaned on a lot of guys in emergency response when I started to build this out. Hey, what would you wish you had on scene? Think of all the big disasters you've been on. What did you wish you had, that you didn't? And one of the guys said to me, Randy, always remember, when people lose their basic needs, their needs stay basic. And that was just something that was in my mind as we started to go around the truck and just determine what I wanted where and what equipment I wanted. And it rings true if you think about it. You know, the truck's really dynamic. The Avenger's a really cool looking truck. It's really dynamic, but the package itself, it's just really simple stuff.
Yeah. I know I walked around it and I got to see how things are kind of laid out, so it's pretty unique, and it makes sense, of seeing all that. I didn't realize a shower was on there, and I don't know if I didn't just see it or not, but like that's a cool feature.
It's in a case, so I keep it up top on the truck all the way up on the back. It's in a Deployed Logic puts their equipment in really nice cases. They're called the best case, and it just keeps everything. I can unload it, set it up.
From the leadership and lessons from the field side of it, like what are some of the biggest leadership lessons you've learned doing this?
Boy, leadership lessons. I really try not to even take a leadership role doing this, I think what's going to be really important is I want to grow it. So I'm starting to leverage some of our people we work with and growing this outreach is, there's a responsibility that comes with it. If you're going to go do this, maybe that's it. The responsibility of trying to do it right and keep everybody, their feelings and what they're going through protected. This is not, hey, we're here, look at what we're doing for you. This is, hey, we're here. What can I do for you? Anything. Let me know. What are your needs? I've met departments in LA and Western North Carolina where I'm home here trying to get them supplies still. I'm going to get them some stuff they need. There's a responsibility that comes with it. Just trying to represent those people that are affected. I guess that would be it.
How does, I would imagine that there's got to be a balancing act between doing this and then fulfilling your roles at Fire Department Coffee, and then plus like just life as a family man, life as a firefighter. Like how do you manage all of that, or is this one of those things when you figure it out you'll let me know?
yeah I'm managing as best I can. You know what, I think it's perspective, Rob, right? It's always perspective. We are blessed. This company's blessed to be able to do these things. So, I guess I can say, oh, I'm traveling, I'm doing all that. I look at it and try to keep my frame of mind like, you're lucky to have this opportunity. You're blessed to do this. My wife knows, I talked to her about this project for years about what I would do if I could get a truck that we could send and serve people. And so she knows because we're just, people are like, well, how do you decide where to activate? Well, me and Luke and Jason and a couple other people get on a phone call and say, are you watching what's going on in Greenfield, Iowa? Are you watching what's going on in LA? Yep, we're watching it. Okay, what does this look like if we send the truck? How do we do this? Do we have people on the ground there that we know that we can contact? And we did in LA. Ryan Souter, who works for LA County. West Coast Firefighter Blankets. Good man, good family man, great firefighter, good friend. We reached out and said, hey, this is kind of what we're thinking. Can you help us arrange this, But anyway, my wife, as I travel, she's knows you got to go. I know what this means. You got to go. One of these days she's going to go with me,
Yeah.
She's like, I'm dying to go with you. I want to go serve. So I'm trying to manage the family and then the station life and FDC. It's a balancing act, but perspective. You better keep the perspective right. You're lucky. I'm lucky to be able to do these things. We have a great team, and nothing gets done here. We have a team around us, Rob, that is second to none, and it's the people that like keep me driven, because they're here working. And this is no joke. I've said this to, Sam Massa came out with us and served. So there's another, when we went to Western North Carolina, fire tech's right there. We know Sam through the business. Can I ship product to your warehouse? I need supplies because we'll empty this truck in a day. I need freight sent. But Sam and I talked, and I said, Sam, if there's not somebody running your company when you're out riding this truck with us, because he served several days before I got there. The truck went with some other people. And if there's not people here doing what they do and they're not being successful and running this business, we can't go do these things. I can't go to Sioux
Right.
Falls for a week if there's not people here that are doing everything they are doing every day. So even though they don't get to go do the stuff, and that's one of my goals is to get them more involved so that they can, but nothing
What
gets done without a team.
right. What advice would you have for firefighters or first responders who want to get involved in this kind of disaster relief work?
Man, you can start. I think every first responder in the country has a skill set. You know, we because we do what we do, and I don't care if it's career or volunteer, that makes no difference to me. You have a skill set that's valuable in these situations, and I think you can always give back right in your community. You can go to organizations like, um, who are we talking about? It's escaping me. Um, the gray shirts. I'm a gray shirt. The Rubicon.
Oh, Team Rubicon, yeah.
There's organizations like Red Cross, like Team Rubicon, you know, that go serve. I just got an email because I'm a gray shirt with Rubicon. I got a text message today. They're still operating for Hurricane Helene. So they're still operating, I believe, in Georgia and Western North Carolina, maybe also Tennessee. But you have a unique skill set, and you can put it to use, and you will be rewarded. I promise you.
Yeah, it's I think that is always one of the things, like you just can't overstate it. We have a particular set of skills, like it's like we're in the movie Taken, except we're going to use them for really good things. We're not going to violently hurt anybody. So on a lighter note, you know, I've got to ask, what's your go-to fire department coffee blend after a long shift or even a
Oh
long
man,
deployment?
my favorite. Well, what's funny is what I brewed up. I'm in the office all the time, and we have the coffee of the month club, and that's the only roast that we do every month that's a single origin coffee. So last month I believe was Colombian. So we do, what that means is in that bag is a single origin. It's not a blend. And I walked by a bin this morning out on the floor, and my favorite coffee is Peru. And I looked down, and our coffee of the month this month is Peru. So I hurry up and busted a bag open. For me, Peruvian coffee is my favorite. You open the bag, it smells like chocolate, but we don't have that all year round. So
Mm-hmm.
what I will do is buy about 20 bags, and I still have to buy. I'll buy about 20 bags and take it home. But run of the mill all year round donut shop.
Okay.
Our donut shop is, and some people are like, well, what donut shop? Does that mean it's a flavored? No, it's just a blend. There's no flavoring in it. But it is, I tell people it's a good morning, lunchtime, after dinner. It's just kind of an all around good, just smooth, good drinking coffee. Donut shop.
All right. How has being part of the fire department coffee shaped your perspective on the fire service and first responder culture?
Wow. It's funny because you kind of go back and forth, and I think you probably do too. You start to see the things that you and I work with when we're at the station in our mitigation role, thinking, oh man, why are we're not strong in this area? And you can call it, take your pick. Is it recruitment, retention? Is it whatever it is? And then we go to Sioux Falls like you and I did, and you watched all those speakers get up there and talk about the fire service and the changes and the things that are positive. And then I go up here and I think,
Mm-hmm.
man, we are in a good spot. We're in a good spot with some of these companies and the men and women that we serve with from other agencies. So again, it's perspective, but I think the fire service is in a good spot. I think firefighters and first responders have to get better about how we portray the job and how we find young people to come in and do it. I think for a long time, we have not advertised ourselves the right way. And I
Yeah.
think that's just the nature of the business, right? We are the fixers. We want to go fix. We don't need any thank yous. We just want to go do it. But we're talking to the generation of kids that we need to come in and do this job. And I spoke about this a little bit in Sioux Falls, but we're talking to them about a great job with great benefits and a good retirement and blah, 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 blah,
Yes.
all the things. But this generation of kids isn't motivated by that as much as I was.
Hmm.
My parents said, hey, you need a good, because my dad worked in a machine shop as a machinist trying to raise a family of four. My mom raised a house, she was the housewife and kept us going. My dad said, you need a wage at this, you need a retirement, you need good health insurance, well, now we're in a generation that isn't motivated by that. And whether it's good or bad, it doesn't matter. It's affecting our trade. So we need to go out there and represent in the things that are motivating, this generation. But I think the fire
Yeah.
service is going to be in good hands. I really do. I think we have to be optimistic about it and do our part.
I think that when we change the messaging around from the good benefits and the good pay and the schedule to focusing on making a difference in people's lives, I think that's when we're going to see the best of the generation come forward and step up to the plate. And we recently had our firefighter test announcement, so I did a couple videos on my own fire department social media about taking the test, put some posts up, and it was important to, I think, talk to that because like saying like, hey, we have a 20-year retirement, like no one's thinking about that.
No, no.
And some might be in tune to the pay and the benefits, but they're looking for work-life balance and what that actually means in the real world,
Yep.
and we have to understand it. So yeah, those are interesting points.
You know, uh, this generation has been had access to media and news since they could walk. So they see the things that are going on in the world, not only their community, but the world and how it's affecting people. And they see people who have been, wronged or the travesties that take place. I've heard guys say this group of kids isn't very passionate, and I argue. I said they are very passionate. They want to help and make a difference. We just haven't said, "Hey, I'm a fireman. I'll give you 15 reasons a day that you can help somebody. I'll give you 15 ways every single shift where you can impact someone's life." And we don't talk about it that way, you know.
No.
Um, I think this is a very passionate group of kids that's coming, and we just have to communicate with them better about what we offer, about the
Yeah.
technology that's in the fire service, right? We don't talk, you and I think about a tick. It's just a tick. It's part of our everyday piece of equipment. I make sure the battery's changed. We don't talk about the drones that we have. Our battalions each have a drone with a thermal camera on them for some of our bigger factory fires and stuff. We don't talk about that. Talk about the technology. Talk about every piece of equipment that you have on a truck or in an ambulance that has a screen on it, or that they can relate to because they've had a cell phone since they were two. So they're not uh, afraid of that type of technology. In fact, they want to embrace it. We don't talk about all the technology in the fire service. you know
Yeah. I sometimes wonder because like I think of the resistance to something like the SAM system and then how it's embraced by the younger generation, and then sometimes the new technology kind of, it doesn't meet with the old, but it collides. But I think that it collides sometimes because we have forgive me for this, like old people putting it into place where we need the younger people to be like, no, this is how you implement it.
yeah, it's
Um,
coming.
yeah,
We spoke about it at the dealer meeting, but whoever has that technology, there's a group of kids coming that are going to spec trucks and get into this trade that are not intimidated by digital equipment and technology. In fact, they're gonna run it. I tell our guys at the station, I said, this kid comes in, and you're upset that he doesn't know in the toolbox, he doesn't know the difference between a crescent wrench and a screwdriver,
hmm
or a pair of vice grips. He doesn't know, and and I said, well, you're upset about that. He's worthless. He's this. I said, what if you knew that he was from a single parent home, just his mother. There's 3 brothers in the house. She's working 3 jobs to make sure she can pay the bills and feed them. And there wasn't a dad in the house like you had or like I had to point me to the toolbox and say, go fix your bike. The tire's flat. Here's the tools. Go fix it. I said,
Right.
and they all say, oh, well, yeah, if I knew that, I wouldn't be so hard on him. I said, well, that's probably a large portion of these kids, but you got to take the time and find out. And the other thing is, he has a different skill set. He could, I said, break into the Pentagon on his cell phone, right? So bring that quality that he's good at into the station somewhere, and maybe get him involved in inventories, get him involved in hose testing and marking these couplings and keeping track of everything we're doing training wise, right? Help him with your morning lineup on the computer. Get him involved in that and the things he's good at, and then he'll trust you to teach him with those other things. But what we do, and I'm guilty, younger in my career. Maybe I'm 50 years old now. Maybe that's part of the reason that I'm feeling different about it. But I was like, hey, I ain't got time. You don't know. You're not good at anything. I don't have time.
Yeah.
I think part of that comes with age.
Well, and I if like we teach people how to mop the floor, we teach them how to make their bed now, because like if they don't have that skill set, they don't have, like, instead of bitching about it and being like, I can't believe this guy doesn't know, let's just teach him to make the bed, because within 10 minutes he's going to have the skill down and we can fucking move on, right? Like,
yeah,
excuse
exactly.
me for my language there,
what?
but like,
He's here for 30 years.
Yeah.
He's here for 30 years. So do you want him to, somebody that doesn't have that skill set sit next to you for your rest of your career? I think we, the communities deserve better than that. We had a kid that ran the dish. Somebody saw him at Station 2. They saw him load the dishwasher at night and close the door and start it. And they go, hey, did you put soap in the dispenser? He's like, no, I didn't know you had to do that. He had been on the job like 4 months. So the guys were all like, oh my God. And then another kid came in on, Station 2 was one of the last. I think they still mow their own lawn. We all did for a while, but with lawn day was Thursday or whatever. But he didn't know how to start the push lawnmower. He's on a fire department of 300 people, serving a town of 155,000 that runs 34,000 runs a year, and didn't know how to run a lawnmower. Do I yell at him, or do I teach him? Because if he probably can't start a lawnmower, I bet he can't run a chainsaw.
Yeah.
I bet he can't run a K-12. So
he's going to have a hard time starting a portable generator.
Yes.
Yes. I just have another later question here for you, because it was in your bio. You help protect fire department coffee from lawsuits thanks to Jason Patton and firefighter Fenton. Any wild stories that you can share about that?
Oh, you know what? We would not be a viewer friendly podcast if I told some of those stories. But what I will tell you is, for a lot of listeners that don't know, Fire Department Coffee's in Rockford, Illinois. That's where Luke started it, our CEO and founder. He was a Rockford fireman. And then Jason's in Riviera Beach, Florida, and Fenton's in Daisy Mountain, Arizona. And what I will say is they are just the way they are in real life, and they're a joy to be around. And I know when you put yourself out on socials like we do, you're going to take the good with the bad. You get beat up a little bit, but they are great ambassadors for the job. And I've seen them stand in lines for hours, whether it's FDIC or wherever, to meet every little kid as guys come up and say, hey, my kid watches, we watch your videos. Well, get your kid on the phone. Let's FaceTime him. And there's times where we're traveling and we'll find out that we'll get messages that, hey, I got somebody in the hospital here who's going through something. They'd love to see you if you're in town. And I've taken both of them guys to the hospitals, and I've waited out because I'm not as famous. I've waited out in the parking lot while they went up and paid a visit. And they don't take pictures, and they don't. That's just the stuff you do because it's the right thing to do, and those two are as good as it gets. So
yeah, I have to say, I think one of the funniest moments, and it wasn't, and Fenton's going to steal the show here over Jason, was somebody realizing that his mustache was not real.
Oh yeah, I thought
I watched somebody. It was like if I went to a 5-year-old and told them Santa Claus wasn't real or something, right? Like it was. I watched this person go through it. It was.
Oh yeah. I thought Brent was going to get punched one year. So a guy came up to him with his buddies. There's like three guys and they come right up to his face and they go, "Hey man, I got $50 on it with these guys. They say it's not real. It better be real." And I saw Brent, his eyes got big, and he just grabbed the corner of it and peeled it back. And the guy was like, "You gotta be kidding me," But man, did we laugh. But the guy was dead serious. He's like, "I got a $50 bet with these guys."
Well, Randy, we've been going on for about an hour. Is there anything that we missed in this conversation, or anything you want to add?
No, man, I appreciate I appreciate you having me on. Humbled by it that you would want to have me on here. And I guess the last thing is for the people that support us. None of this is possible without our supporters. We appreciate it. We're going to keep giving back as much as we can and try to be good stewards of this opportunity that we have. And so we appreciate the support from everybody.
We've got a couple things coming up. FDIC is coming up. Is there any other events that are coming up that the fire department coffee is going to be at, or the truck's going to be at?
You know what? I'm getting ready for FDIC. Absolutely, the truck will be on the show floor in the Rosenbauer booth. They have graciously requested, would you have the truck in our booth and serve coffee out of it? So come get a cup of coffee from me at FDIC in the Rosenbauer booth. But storm season's coming in the Midwest, man. So what's interesting is when I went to Greenfield, Iowa last year, it wasn't even storm season yet, and there had been 142 tornadoes on the ground in Iowa. And you don't normally think of, or at least I hadn't grown up, think of Iowa as, you think of Kansas and Oklahoma and stuff like that.
Right.
Well, with our weather patterns, Tornado Alley's kind of moving east. We had some tornadoes in Wisconsin last summer, which you don't think of. Then Illinois is right through there. So the truck will be rolling. I hope it doesn't. I really hope it doesn't, but my gut's telling me it's just going to be more and more need. But come see us at FDIC. That's the next one on the books. The other ones aren't scheduled.
All right. Well, Randy, hang out for a second after here. But this is Rob from Frontline Mindset with National Fire Radio. Very thankful for Randy James coming on today, talking about the Rescue One project with the disaster relief truck from Rosenbauer in partnership with Fire Department Coffee. I hope to see you guys out there. We'll see you at FDIC. Randy, thank you again, brother, and we will catch you guys out there. Be safe.
Thank you.